The release of a 911 call related to the tragic murders of 4 University of Idaho students has captivated both the public and the media ahead of Bryan Kohberger's trial. The call, placed shortly after the killings, provides crucial insight into the events surrounding the deaths of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Kohberger, a former criminology student, is accused of brutally stabbing the 4 victims in an off-campus house in Moscow, Idaho, on November 13, 2022. This event has sent shockwaves through the tight-knit university community, drawing widespread attention and sparking discussions about the investigation, the suspect, and the broader implications of such a crime. The 911 call in question was made by one of the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen, who, along with Bethany Funk, managed to survive the night. Mortensen, who was in the house at the time of the killings, later reported to investigators that she had heard noises during the night that caused her to feel uneasy, but she did not immediately call authorities. It wasn't until the following morning that she discovered the bodies of her friends. The call, made at approximately 11:58 a.m. on November 13th, is the first confirmation of the gruesome crime and sets the stage for the subsequent investigation. The 911 call reveals a state of confusion and panic, with Mortensen's voice trembling as she explains the situation. She initially provides only the bare details, stating that she found the victims after waking up, then calmly indicating that there had been a murder in the house. As the operator attempts to gather more information, Mortensen's nervousness is palpable. Her initial hesitation reflects the shock and trauma she likely experienced upon discovering the carnage. The chilling nature of the crime is apparent in her scattered responses, which suggests that she was processing the magnitude of the situation while trying to communicate clearly enough for the dispatcher to send help. The complexity of the 911 call lies not just in the content of the exchange, but in its broader implications for the investigation and the trial of Bryan Kohberger. Mortensen's failure to immediately call authorities is a key point that investigators have considered when piecing together the timeline of events. Her actions, or lack thereof, have led to speculation about the psychological and emotional toll the event took on her. Many have questioned whether fear, confusion, or a delay in realizing the severity of the situation contributed to the delay in notifying law enforcement. As the investigation unfolded, the police and FBI worked meticulously to piece together evidence from the scene. The murders themselves were carried out with a brutal level of violence, with each of the victims being stabbed multiple times. The weapon used was later determined to be a fixed-blade knife, though at the time of the 911 call, investigators were still in the process of gathering evidence. The scene of the crime was also deeply unsettling, with some reports indicating that 2 of the victims were found in bed, while the others were discovered in different parts of the house, leading to speculation about the sequence of the killings. For a time, the investigation seemed to stall. Despite the magnitude of the crime, there were few leads, and Moscow, a small town with a population of around 25,000, was shaken by the unprecedented nature of such a violent act. Local law enforcement agencies, initially handling the case, found themselves overwhelmed by the scale of the investigation. This led to the involvement of the Idaho State Police and the FBI, both of which worked tirelessly to piece together the few clues that were available. It wasn't until December 30, 2022, that Kohberger was arrested in connection with the murders. The arrest was a result of both DNA evidence found at the crime scene and the discovery of a vehicle matching the description of the one seen near the house around the time of the killings. Kohberger's background as a criminology PhD student at Washington State University added a chilling layer to the case, as it raised questions about his potential motivations and whether he might have been studying the psychology of violent crime before committing it himself. Kohberger's arrest, which took place in Pennsylvania, was followed by an extradition back to Idaho, where he was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and burglary. As the trial date approaches, the release of the 911 call has raised the profile of the case even further. Many are eager to hear how the defense and prosecution will handle the case, with Kohberger's defense team likely to focus on casting doubt on the prosecution's evidence, while the prosecution will attempt to paint a picture of deliberate, premeditated murder. The 911 call serves as a key piece of evidence, highlighting the panic, confusion, and horror of the night, but it also raises more questions about Mortensen's actions in the aftermath of the killings. What led her to delay calling the authorities? Was she so frightened that she couldn't process the situation, or did she fear for her own safety in the immediate aftermath? In addition to Mortensen's 911 call, law enforcement officials have released other pieces of evidence, including surveillance footage showing a white Hyundai Elantra in the area at the time of the murders. The car, which was traced back to Kohberger, was a pivotal piece of the investigation and ultimately led to his arrest. Kohberger's movements before and after the murders have been closely scrutinized, and his online activity, particularly his behavior on social media platforms, is also likely to play a role in the prosecution's case. Many have pointed to the apparent obsession with the victims that Kohberger may have had, though this remains largely speculative at this stage. Throughout the investigation and the subsequent media coverage, Kohberger's personal history has come under scrutiny. He was described by friends and acquaintances as someone who was quiet and reserved, with a tendency to be introspective and occasionally socially awkward. Some have speculated that these characteristics may have contributed to his apparent fixation on the victims. Others have pointed to his academic background, suggesting that he may have been motivated by a desire to prove his criminological theories or test his knowledge in a real-world context. However, none of this is confirmed, and much of it is based on speculation and circumstantial evidence. The trial is likely to focus heavily on the forensic evidence gathered by law enforcement. DNA samples collected from the crime scene, the vehicle, and Kohberger's person will be crucial in linking him to the crime. The knife used in the murders, which has not yet been recovered, will also play a significant role in the case. Prosecutors will attempt to demonstrate that Kohberger was the perpetrator of a premeditated act of violence, while the defense will likely try to poke holes in the prosecution's case, focusing on issues like the strength of the DNA evidence and the lack of a clear motive. The psychological elements of the case will also come into play during the trial. Kohberger's background as a criminology student will likely be discussed in relation to the planning and execution of the murders. If he was indeed studying criminal behavior, the prosecution will argue that his actions were the result of deliberate calculation and an understanding of criminal psychology.